Good afternoon, and thank you for joining our webinar today. My name is Eric Kinman from Learning Sciences International, and I'm your host for today's webinar. I'm pleased to welcome you to today's webinar called iObservation, Powerful Evaluation Insights for Sustainable Improvement with Lee Manley, our resident expert on the iObservation platform. Our webinar today is scheduled for about 45 minutes, and we'll have time for questions at the end. Before we start, I have a few helpful reminders for today's webinar. Because of the size of today's audience, your audio lines are muted during the presentation. However, we welcome your questions and comments. You may submit those by using the Go to Webinar question pane located on your screen. Finally, today's webinar will be recorded and a link will be distributed to you via email. Feel free to share the presentation with your colleagues who may have been unable to attend. Now, let's get started with the webinar. Lee, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Eric, and I am pleased to join you today and welcome everyone. Whether you are currently using iObservation or this is brand new content to you, hopefully this will answer some questions, and we would love to talk to you further after the webinar. So please give us some questions. You should see a question box in your GoToWebinar control panel. Just put those in. We will answer as many as possible during the webinar at the end, or we will follow up if we don't get to them all. So let's get started. First of all, who is Learning Sciences International? Well, we have an applied research center, and I'm going to actually show you a little bit of that data that we collect and we analyze. You can see a picture of the research center located in West Palm Beach, Florida there on the right on the slide. We provide technology tools for evaluation as well as growth and instruction. We are leading experts in teacher and principal growth in development and in evaluation. We partner with national education experts like Dr. Robert Marzano. In fact, I will show Dr. Marzano's latest framework in our demo today. And we have account services. We are lucky to have some wonderful account teams that are there every step of the way to help districts in their implementation. So what is iObservation? Well, it is an interactive system that everyone gets access. All what we refer to as administrators or observers, all observers, administrators at the central office, teachers. It is a web-based system. So everyone has access, and that provides tremendous benefits that we'll talk more about here in just a minute. It supports the entire process when it comes to observations, principals typically, or system principals going into the classroom, instructional coaches doing observations, and supports the whole summative evaluation process. And I'll show you a little bit more when we go into the system here in just a minute. It streamlines the whole process in terms of reporting and taking that data and to help administrators, principals make decisions on what's going on in the classroom. So it provides a unique window to that in terms of professional development and how we can best help teachers. And finally, planning and collaboration for teachers, and I'll show you specifically what that looks like. But that gives them, many times they're of course involved in PLCs and face-to-face discussions, but this is another way that they can interact virtually. So benefits, easy to use, and I'm going to show that to you. You can use it on a variety of devices. I mentioned earlier that it is web-based. All you need is a device and a browser. So I work with lots of districts and I see them using a variety of devices, whether it's an iPad or some other, maybe an Android tablet. I've even seen some folks use an iPhone, which you can do, or more traditionally, you could use a laptop or a netbook or Chromebook. So variety of different things you can use it for. For teachers, they can easily track their evaluation progress. So it's a very transparent, process in which the evaluation process goes through. It supports multiple models. So I mentioned we do work with Dr. Robert Marzano, but we work with some other researchers as well, and we also support custom forms, which we help districts with. So if they're doing a special initiative in terms of maybe it's reading or math or maybe it's discipline, we can upload a custom form and assign that to users if it's something that is important to the district. It's also used to deliver both formative and evaluative feedback, and that's important because sometimes maybe it's a peer teacher, maybe it's an instructional coach that's not really an evaluator, but they can still deliver some formative feedback. That goes for the traditional observer as well. They don't have to give evaluative feedback, and I can show you how they do that, but it's very powerful and helpful in terms of growing teachers. We'll get into the online resource library, very helpful, lots of resources for helping everyone in a school or district understand a particular framework. And it's evidence-based, and I'll show you that in the protocols, but that is a very important point because you might have seen other evaluation systems or frameworks or models that rely more on subjective criteria, but this is very objective. This is evidence-based, and that's helpful for the observer, especially in assigning a score and providing feedback, that we give the tools within the system to help them do that and provide meaningful feedback to help the teacher grow from year to year. Collaboration is one of the big things that that districts use iObservation for. I mentioned PLCs earlier. Also, whether you have PLCs or not, it really helps create an online community of practice, teachers growing together. You could even put principals or system principals into this category. In their learning, they're sharing ideas, they're sharing resources in a virtual sense. It also helps establish a common language of instruction. And that's important because we see different things when we go into the classroom, or we might call it different things, but this helps in an evaluation model. Also, you think of it as an instructional model, but helps gives us that common language of instruction, so we know what we're talking about when we engage in discussions. Mentorship and PLC. So as I'm helping a new teacher, they might be struggling in certain areas that that maybe I'm a veteran and it comes easy for me, but I can help them, and I have a tool to record feedback, and I can provide that feedback, and I can also celebrate success as they are learning new strategies and they're implementing and they're having the courage to do that, and I can celebrate with them, and this is a mechanism to do that. I can even drop in a picture of something that I saw in the classroom to help them celebrate. So one of the big takeaways from our time today is the goal of evaluation, specifically when we're talking about teachers. There are two components, and there is, you see here on the graphic, both a growth and a measurement component. And this is one of the things that you can kind of see the seesaw here. Sometimes different evaluation systems or instruments tilt to one way or the other. Many times, and when we first start talking to districts, they have more of a measurement system in place, which is good, and that's frankly pretty easy in terms of measurement. I can tell you where you are, but it's a whole nother matter to give you the growth feedback to get you to where you want to go as a teacher. That's where the growth component comes in. And what we do in our research and the tools that we provide, the training that we provide, growth is of paramount importance. You see there at the top of the subheading, building expert teachers. So in order to build expert teachers, they need the growth feedback. They need it to easily understand what they need to do to get to the next level. But at the end of the year, you also need the summative evaluation piece, because I'm sure most, if not everyone, is under a state mandate that they need to provide that to teachers each year, or whatever the evaluation cycle might be. In terms of implementation supports, this is key in any evaluation system that you're looking at. And maybe you've joined us today and you want to see what this is all about and want to find out more information. Maybe you're looking at other systems. Maybe you have a system that you're considering to make a change. But this is one of the key items that, as I work with districts, teachers have questions, observers, administrators have questions. What's the framework all about that we're using? What are the specific indicators? What do those mean? What does good implementation look like? What does not so good implementation look like? So here are some of the resources that we provide as a help for districts, and it really takes the burden off administrators and principals. When they have these resources, the teachers have an easy place to go find more information. So you see there at the top, iAcademy. That is a very robust system that both observers and teachers use alike to learn more about the evaluation model. The resource library, which I'll show you in just a minute, we've got 400 to 500 resources in there, and they are videos, documents, interviews, webinar recordings, all kinds of information. You can just go on there and do a search to find what you need. Master scored videos, we just updated. We added more in our fidelity module, which helps districts on an ongoing basis with their rater agreement and rater accuracy as they're watching videos, and they're actually scoring teachers in classrooms, and then they can see how close they got to the master score. You see the picture here of the Essentials series. So strategy specific books that are written for teachers to help them in the strategies, and then quick reference guides that many districts use as teachers are planning their lessons. How do I plan with these techniques in mind? Are my activities matching to the standard? So those are some of the supports. Now, when you think of evaluation, normally you think of, well, somebody's going to come into my classroom, they're going to get out their iPad or their laptop, and they're going to be recording information, entering in scores, and as a teacher, it's more of something that's imposed upon me that I have very little control over. And one of the neat features that teachers really like about iObservation is the growth plan feature. This helps teachers, and in short, what they do is they choose an area of growth. So something that a strategy, and I'll show you this in the system, but the screenshot there shows helping students examine similarities and differences. So this is a teacher, a hypothetical teacher that chose this area because it's something that they want to get better in, that either they don't do it at all, or they're just starting, or in this case at the beginning level. So very much it's a different dynamic than the yes, the traditional evaluation cycle is necessary, but this adds a component where it's in the teacher's hands in terms of what do I need, what tool would be best to help my practice and ultimately to help my students. And I put in action steps for a clear pathway and how I'm going to achieve success. I get feedback throughout the year. A table is populated. I can easily see how I'm doing. And then my success, I celebrate my success with my observer or instructional coach in terms of building that capacity with different strategies. So this is helpful for an observer that I can see from at a quick glance. And I'll show you what this looks like in the system, that I can go in and I can see exactly what this teacher chose. So in this case, examining similarities and differences. So I just look for that bullseye target, and if I have 30 or 40 teachers, it would be extremely difficult to keep that in my head. What strategy did you choose, and which one did another teacher choose? I can see that the system does it for me. And one of the big things, and you know, talking about evaluation as a whole, when it comes, for example, with Dr. Marzano's models, iObservation supports all four. So that is the teacher model, the non-classroom instructional support model. So that is, think of guidance counselors, school psychologists, nurses, library media specialists, then school leader model. Then there is a district leader model. So all of these come together to work as one, if you will. So the common language is there in the different models, and it's, as you see on the left, many times what districts go through is, well, they've got different models for different positions. Everyone kind of doing their own thing, going in different directions, which is not bad. But everyone has a different language. Everyone is focused on something unique. For example, many times we ask teachers, well, how is your principal evaluated? Unfortunately, many times they say, I have no idea. I didn't even know they were evaluated. Well, this helps, and iObservation is the catalyst to this, that everyone is accountable to the district. Everyone is accountable ultimately to students. So this is one of the, iObservation is the conduit to help make that and help us get going in with aligned systems moving in the same direction. And the value of data, and this is a key point, because it offers a window. I touched on this earlier. Offers a window for a district in term that many did not have before. So, meaning what's going on in our classrooms? Exactly what strategies are teachers using? What percentage of the time do they use those strategies? And are they the same strategies that we used last year as a district? Are they the same ones that we used the year before that? How are we changing and evolving as a district? So this is based on, I believe, close to 3 million points of data from across the country that we gather insights from through iObservation into the exact strategies that teachers are using. So observers go into the classroom, and purely frequency, you look at there at the top right, these are strategies closer associated with lecture, practice, and review, more direct instruction. So you can see there 47% of the time. So a big chunk of the time we're seeing direct instruction. Down there at the lower left, these are more critical for developing cognitively complex skills in students. So just over 3%. Well, the message here is, and we work constantly with districts on how to affect this, because many, depending on your state and your standards, but most states have made the transition to more college career ready standards and assessments that have many times 40 to 50% of test items down there at the lower left level. So ultimately, it could be an issue for students. So if our instruction is up here at the top right, but standards and assessment items are down here at the lower left, there is a gap. And with iObservation, districts track this in terms of how they're progressing year to year. Which brings me to my next point. So that was national data that we were looking at. Now this is more district specific data, and districts pull this information from the system and look at this. Could be monthly, could be by the semester, it could be by the school year. what strategies are observers saying? What are they not saying? You can also look at this through a lens of building by building, as well as down to the teacher level. So if an observer is trying to help a teacher, and they can see the go-to strategies that they're using and the ones that they're not using as much, and help them in their professional development for either a group of teachers or all teachers, as they need help as they're implementing some of the other strategies. And this is an example of another report that I can drill down into iObservation and see the score count. You can see here under the instruction category, how many scores have we had? What's the average score? And then I can drill down onto those and see, well, how is the district performing on a certain strategy? In this case, examining similarities and differences. And how does that compare to the building? In this case, we're looking at the scoring. So is the scoring similar to the district, or is the building higher or lower? In this case, the scoring is a little bit lower at the building than it is at the district level in this example. So for the teacher evaluation module, and I'm speaking of the evaluation process, the system can help you at every step of the way. We support the full process with the preloaded forms that you need, and I'll show you an example here in just a moment. The scoring is very easy to follow, and that's extremely helpful for districts, because part of the evaluation process is observers, administrators communicating to teachers, here's exactly where your score comes from. So at the end of the year, no one is surprised. We also support multiple measures. So you can see some examples there in parentheses, whether it's student growth. So depending on your state, student growth might be a component. I work with some districts that deliberate practice is a component. So that measure comes from the growth plan that I showed you an example of just a minute ago. We can apply domain and element weighting, so we can weight elements differently if that's a goal for the district. It's an easy process in terms of the acknowledgments. So if your district, maybe you have the requirement, we want the teacher to sign with a pen on a hard copy, put it in a physical file. We can support that. Or if it's an electronic acknowledgement, where all they have to do is click a box and we log that electronically, and that might suffice. Or maybe you need both. The important thing is, I mentioned, we have account teams that help at each step of the way. And whether you're trying to find a report that would be helpful that you're needing, or you're trying to configure for growth plans, or you're adding a different model into the system, we can help you with that. I mentioned preloaded forms. This is an example of a planning conference or pre-conference, and the questions that are loaded. And I can show you one of these within the system of what it looks like and what the teacher would complete. So these are preloaded for you. If you have something else that's unique to your district, we can support that as well to load that in the system. I touched on customized forms, but this is an important feature for many districts. So as they have different initiatives, like I've worked with some districts that have a reading initiative, that observers are going into the classroom and they have specific look-fors when it comes to reading. Some work on attendance. Some have a specific form for maybe nurses that they're tracking practice when it comes to delivery of medication. So a number of things that could be done that we could help you. Typically, we get the form from you, and our programmers will take a look at it and see if we can get that form in the system to see if it's whether it's a questionnaire for just gathering feedback, or if it's a scored form where there is actual components for scoring and weighting. So again, if you have questions, please put those into the chat. And I am going to transition now into iObservation. All right, so I am on the home screen here, and you can see at a glance we've got a section here for first-time users. Generally, teachers are using these if they want to get started. You can see some quick start guides here, getting started, conferences, discussions, resource library, down here in this section. So as an observer, I'm going to start my day, and I'm going to go to this really neat report here called Observation Progress. So at a glance, when it comes to observations, what do I need to do today? So let's look at the teacher model. So these are my teachers, and I've only got 3 here, but if I had maybe 25 or 30 teachers, I would have a list of teachers. And to see the required look-fors, how am I doing? Well, for Faith Fletcher, I've completed all 23. For Wallace and Lois, I've got a ways to go. So that helps me decide which classrooms I'm going to. Draft observations, if I have some that are still in draft, the ones I've finished, the remaining, and then what type are they? So you see these letters here, F for formal, and then I for informal, and W for walkthrough. So at a glance, I can see, and these are automatically checked off as I complete these. So let's go into conduct an observation. So these are my teachers, and you can see these drop downs here, and it says forms plural. So if, for example, if Nina was a library media specialist, we would tag her with the non-classroom instructional support form. Faith Fletcher, she is a teacher, a hypothetical teacher, so you see the default form is the teacher evaluation model. So let's get started with Faith. And this is the Marzano model. This is the latest focus model with 23 elements. And you can see up top here, I'm going to declare a type, and I just simply click on one of these to declare formal, informal, walkthrough. I've got universal evidences, as well as I can call up ELA and literacy, or math. So that helps me because we've built in some specific evidences for these subject areas that is very helpful for the teachers in those respective subjects. I can cancel this. I can save and close it. I can save it as a draft. But once I'm done, I click finish, and it goes right to the teacher's email and tells them they've got observation feedback waiting for them. You see the bullseye here. So this tells me that for Faith, her area of focus is helping students examine similarities and differences. And I'll show you that in just a moment, what she completed and loaded for her growth plan. But for now, let's go into identifying critical content from the standards. So these are, what you're looking at here is, these are the protocols. So this helps me as an observer, as I'm scoring and I'm looking for certain things in the classroom. Also is a big help for teachers as they're planning their lesson. How do I identify critical content? The focus statement that you see here, very straightforward. Students can identify accurate critical content during a lesson or part of a lesson. There's also a desired effect. Evidence demonstrates students know what content is important versus not important. So pretty straightforward. Then example teacher instructional techniques. So this helps a teacher as they're planning, well, how am I going to identify critical content in my lesson tomorrow? Well, I could use verbal, visual cueing. I could use storytelling. I could model it. So as an observer, as I'm seeing these, I can check these easily to give feedback. Now, again, I don't have to check any of these, but it's a help for me as an observer. What are some of the likely things that I might see that the teacher used to plan? Then I've got other sections for monitoring for learning. Example, student evidence. So what kind of evidence, and I mentioned that during the slides, this is evidence-based. So it's not my opinion of you as a teacher. I'm looking at the evidence, and ultimately what's most important to me are the students producing evidence that the strategy is having the desired effect. And does the teacher have a mechanism in place in order to gather that evidence? So I'll open this up so you can see some of these. Students might be generating a short written response, student conversation in groups, responses to questions, focus on critical content. So these are just some examples. Adaptations. What could the teacher be doing if it still did not have the effect that that they intended? So very simply, I could reteach it, use a new technique, I could reorganize groups, etc. Again, examples. Then I've got my scoring scale. And it's nice because I can just scroll over these and I get up these pop-up descriptions. So for example, applying, 50 to 90% of students should show evidence of having reached the desired effect in their work. So teachers getting to that critical level. To score it, I simply check this box. And again, I'm going through this quickly, but we provide extensive training to observers on the model to help them in their scoring and their accuracy and agreement. I've got a comments box here. So what am I going to say to the teacher to help them? And in this case, the teacher would more than likely like to move from applying to innovating. So how am I going to help them get to that goal? Well, you see some reflection questions here in this link. So let's open this up. So at the applying level, based on student evidence, how might you implement adaptations to achieve the desired effect? More than 90% of student evidence. You know what? That's going to be helpful. So let's copy that. And I'm going to put that in the box, in the comments box, and I'm going to add more comments. So this is a critical step, and we purposefully pose those as questions, the reflection questions, because it should be a professional dialogue back and forth, and we also do coaching, walking classrooms with observers to help them in this process, but it should be constructive dialogue with the teacher back and forth, posing questions. How could you get to more students showing the desired effect? Finally, I can choose a file, any electronic file. I know some observers like to put in pictures. Hey, I saw this student evidence from 3 of the students in the back of the room. Thought you'd like to see it. Great stuff. They were right on task. Or I saw a really interesting target that you used that I want to share with the rest of the staff. And also I took a picture of it. So I can upload that and make it part of this particular observation. I have a spot for overall comments. So these stay with the overall observation as I'm adding more elements and scoring more elements. This will stay with it. So let's go back to, you see this button here, the table of contents. So I'm going to go back to where we started. Now you can see the blue star that tells me that I put in a score for this particular. So it shows me where I've been, but I want to show you something really cool. You see this evaluation, results count towards annual evaluation. If I uncheck that, it doesn't count. It's just formative feedback. If I put a check there, look what happened. Now I've got all of these icons that show me exactly where this teacher is in their summative evaluation. The key is pretty easy to follow. The green star, their evaluation is at applying or above. The gold star, they're at developing or below. So they probably want to work on some of those strategies to improve. If there was a question mark, that means there's no score, that they have not been scored on that particular element yet. So this is fantastic to see. Maybe there's just one observer for the teacher, maybe it's multiple observers, but they can see that. The teacher can see this as well. Observers can see this. Where does each teacher stand? Because every teacher is different, and every teacher has areas that they're working on, that they have maybe they've accomplished a high level in some, and are a little more challenged in others. But at a glance, the observer can see this. So let's exit out of this. And I want to show you, so from a teacher perspective, we've been looking at the observer perspective. So now I'm signed in as Faith Fletcher. And I've got an evaluation tab here where my cursor is. So at any time, I can go in and see my evaluations. So let's go in and view this. Now this is related to the summative evaluation process. So for Faith, if her evaluation was finished today, this would be her final score. And then you see the instructional practice score and student growth score. So don't get hung up on these measures. The majority of districts that we work with, it's 100% instructional practice. Now, if she had a question, well, okay, where did this, I see this score, but where did it come from? Well, these are the observations used to get to this score. These are the types. This is the date and time, the form, and who the observer was. As I mentioned earlier, we help you configure for your district. So those decisions like how many formal, informal, we help configure that for you. So everything is to your policies and procedures. So you can see these are just hypothetical, but shows the teacher, well, formal is not met, formal is not met, informal is, walkthrough is not met yet. We tailor the final score language. We have default language that you see here, or if your state has specific labels that the language needs to be state specific, we can do that as well. And then finally, by domain, the teacher can look, so those areas that I showed you, at a glance, I can see these as competencies for the teacher, so they can quickly see, well, yeah, I'm doing well in these strategies where I'm applying. I've got an innovating here. You know, I've got a beginning here. So helping students examine their reasoning. That's one I really would like to bring up, perhaps to developing or applying. So I could have a conversation with my observer. Hey, I'm going to use this strategy on Friday. Can you come in and take a look? I think I've improved in this particular area. So that's the summative process in terms of transparency in what the teacher can see. So I mentioned growth plans. So Faith did her growth plan. We'll open it up here. She chose similarities and differences. She said her starting point was beginning. Her final goal is applying. Every time an observation happens, it's tracked here. It populates this table, and I can just move my cursor over to see the date and the score that I was given. She has a reflection log. So as she's learning more about the strategy, she can put entries into the log, and she's got action steps. So these are very helpful because it helps teachers formulate a plan, and it's things that they're going to do, steps that they're going to take. We have some preloaded. They can also add more of a free form action step. So like, for example, read the book, Examining Similarities and Differences. Principals will review progress on action plan. Element questions. So student behavior that I want to see improve as a result of focusing on this strategy. And then I can, once as a teacher, she enters this into iObservation, click submit, then it goes to the observer, and they can choose to approve as is, or they can recommend some changes and send it back to the teacher. So it's a very easy process that's highly automated and especially helpful with several teachers and trying to keep track of who's doing what. So I mentioned collaboration tools. I'll show you what. Well, let me resume as Lee here. So discussions are a group. A conference is just one-on-one. So you can see, I mentioned a virtual PLC of sorts. So I can go in and view this. Susan started the discussion, and then you can see the other teachers that are adding their comments and adding their resources to the discussion. So we can talk back and forth. Resource library, I mentioned, is another important component that that especially teachers really use, and they use it in as they're learning strategies on their own. They can use it in a group. They can call up a video. In this case, they can open up the video, put it on the screen. They can discuss it. In most of these, this is 6 minutes, and they're going to see a teacher using the previewing strategy. So this is a math class. And I'm not going to play the whole thing because of our time factors winding down. But the neat thing on this, as even for observers, as they're watching this, we have a debrief document. And what that does, it shows you what this teacher, what standard were they teaching? What was their learning target? Lesson summary, the scale that they used. And then finally, look at so for previewing new content, what was the score? What did the master score put in for the score? And why? What was the rationale for that score? And then feedback, guiding questions for the teacher. So from an observer perspective, that's very helpful to see what the score was, the rationale, and the feedback given. So that is the resource library. We also, mentioning observers, we've just updated our fidelity module. So this is a helpful tool in a resource. I mentioned we do training for observers, new observers, existing observers, teachers, but this is something that schools can do on their own. So the process here, observers see a video, they see a teacher video, and then they're asked a series of questions. This one is an unsecured assessment. So they would see what they answered, and then they see the correct option. So you're looking at the answer key. Then they would see a rationale. Why was this scored applying? Well, it's spelled out here. Because inter-rater agreement and accuracy is a constant process, and the system really supports schools and observers as they're constantly learning, and they're keeping up with their rater agreement with each other, and they want to make sure that they're accurate in their scoring. So Eric, I see we're about at the 45-minute mark. So if there are questions, please let me know.
Okay. We have a few questions here, and let me just get a couple of them out of the way, and then perhaps you can spend about 5 more minutes going through the demonstration.
Sure.
Can you touch a little bit on what the training is like for iObservation? So everything
Yes.
that we've been seeing here, how do we get the educators up to speed and engaged in using this tool?
We can do that either on site, and many times that looks like we'll take a group, maybe 25 or 30 observers at a time. We can even split that into half-day cohorts and take them through the system. Ideally, they would all have their logins by that time. So we're walking with them through the system and some of the common things that they would do, how they would conduct an observation, how they would finish an evaluation. So we can also do those virtually in a progression, typically of three sessions, to where it gets in terms of complexity. The first one is intro, and then we end with reporting and the evaluation process.
Okay,
I'll also add, you see this TV camera here, that's a video, steps to finish an evaluation. So there's lots of help contained in the system as well.
Gotcha. Okay, I've got a couple of questions here. I think we can combine them into one. One of the questions is, can you link this to the Danielson framework? And then a related question is, can we configure the to evaluation parameters for a particular state?
Yes, we can. We also support the Danielson model. I believe it's the 2007 version. So we support that as well. And your other question regarding state models, yes, we can load those as well, and we can help districts in that process, provided there's no. Usually, states are pretty good about copyright and letting districts use that for their own use, and letting us put that into iObservation. But that's something that we can support.
Okay, why don't we spend a few minutes wrapping up on the demonstration, and then I'll close it out. And if we have any questions that come in until then, we'll answer them after the rest of the demo.
Yes, thanks, Eric. And one more, as we're talking about, I mentioned in the slides about the value of data. This is just one report. This is performance by building, and this is extremely helpful. So if I'm an observer, say I'm the principal in a school, I want to get a snapshot of, and maybe there's multiple observers, or maybe it's just myself, but I can see how many observations that I've done, how many scores that equates to, and then our average score. I can also see, I can break this down by domain. So how many times have I scored similarities and differences? What was the average score? And then how does that compare? So here's my building score for this strategy, and here's my district score. So very helpful, because we work with many districts that they might choose a focus area, element of focus, if you will, for maybe a semester or a year. And it helps to track, well, are we really seeing that? And how often? So this is a helpful report. And please,
Okay.
if you have other questions, just you can type those in, and Eric can ask.
Yeah, one more here, Lee. Does the system have to be used for evaluation only?
No, and that's an excellent question, because as I mentioned, this is a powerful model, in that it also, you think of it as an instructional model, and we've worked with Dr. Marzano for several years, and I believe this is the third iteration of his model. So it's based on his work, based on over 40 years of research, and it's really the strategies that are necessary to get kids to those levels of knowledge that they need to thrive with the new standards and new assessments. So absolutely, you could go in here and just give formative feedback to teachers that does not in any way, shape, or form roll into an evaluation score, but gives them critical feedback that they need to get to these, especially the strategies that are more challenging that you can see here, like similarities and differences, examining reasoning, revising knowledge, engaging in cognitively complex tasks. They're just a little more challenging for teachers because they're just not as prevalent based on our data that we get.
Okay, I think that wraps it up for the day. Thank you all for attending the webinar. Please watch for your email tomorrow morning. We'll include a link to this recording. Feel free to watch it again if you like and share it with anybody who might find it useful. And just a reminder that this webinar, we do have some handouts attached to it that supplement what Lee shared with us today. Feel free to download those. I think there's 4 of them. So if we have no further questions, Lee, thank you so much. As always, you were excellent and appreciate everybody's attendance. Have a great day.
Thank you.